If it wasn't bad enough, you absolutely destroyed me with the Tonari death. You then had to give this girl the line about wanting to have Fushi's baby, and Fushi being the adorable little cinnamon roll he is, ignorant to the world and what sex is. This episode shook me, man. If you do want to see the full live reaction to today's emotional gut punch, it is available on the Patreon, but let's kick off episode 2. We're only 2 episodes into this season, and honestly, not gonna lie, I think this death hit me the hardest, because here's the thing with Tonari's death. You knew eventually she would have to die. She's clearly immune to poison, or very close to being immune to most poisons. That is a talent that Fushi, the man who constantly gets drugged and passed out by poison, is going to need. Not only, she's like 50 in this world at this point, and honestly, life expectancies, I don't think a lot of people reach the elderly age, especially if you're a warrior leader. It makes sense that she would die sooner than later. But the death and the way it happened because of this goddamn kid's arm and just the ignorance to what's going on. Hayase continues to haunt this man from the dead. Yes, by the end of the episode, he got more accustomed and was actually excited to see them just because it was fun at that point. But it still doesn't change the fact that this bitch continues to ruin my boy's life from the dead. And the weird, almost Addams Family arm when it dragged the body out the window, it was just so creepy. But the fact that all throughout watching that scene on the bed, where you see our girl, she immediately cuts the goddamn things off of her arm, but unfortunately it was too late. I was thinking, no way, like, they're gonna save her, and then they'll kill her, like, 2 episodes from now, 3 episodes from now. I was expecting an arc with her, right? And instead, they bring her back 40 years later. She had a fulfilling life, I'm not denying that, but she deserves so much better. And then to see my boy go from start to finish of all the different people he's met, and then when it comes to Tonari's name, he can't transform, which makes him happy. And the fact that he didn't realize in the moment who she was, and then he started to explain, like, what type of person she was. Well, she annoyed me at first, but I came to really appreciate her. And to just see, we didn't even see the death. They just cut away to the sunset scene with our boy just standing there saying how she was building her body for you. So that, you know, the owl was injecting poison all her life so that when it came to her passing, Fushi would have a body that was immune to poison. The amount of love that seeped through that death, on one hand, it kind of feels necessary to give him this form, not just to protect himself, but most importantly, I think it was the wake-up call that reminded him that death doesn't have to be the end, and there's gonna be more people that he can make connections with. And seemingly his life did get better, but it still feels very lonely and isolated, and just the amount of pain. Like, this, in my opinion, was the most painful death, because you bring a character back, and we see her for less than 10 minutes combined in both episodes, it feels like, and she reminds us why she became such a crazy-ass character that is one of the series' best. And I hated her character initially, right? But the character development in To Your Eternity never fails to impress. Takes characters you hate and turns them into something better. To just see my boy get the realization when he thinks of her and then reads the book, and just the realization that that was her all along, like, it just hits you in the feels. To see his life afterwards and the kind of routine he got in, it was really interesting because he's actually doing fairly well, because he only stays in a city for 2 days. He leaves before the 3rd day because essentially after a week in one location, all hell breaks loose. And by the 3rd day, the seeds are planted. So even if he left on the 3rd or 4th day, shit will erupt and get very bad. And now it seems like on average, maybe 9 deaths happen from knockers when he's not around. He wishes he could work with others to prevent that, but when you think about how many people die in a second on planet Earth, 9 knockers killing 9 people or something, it really isn't all that bad when you compare the fact that he's actually taking care of them in a relatively solid way, while actually being able to be surrounded by people in the process. The unfortunate thing is that he just can't build those connections, and that scene when he transforms and he's just looking at her reflection, just to see the pain in his voice, it really says it all. And I think that's why on one hand he's so interested in Hayase's descendants, because they're the only reoccurring connection he has at this point. I mean, when he transforms into Rain and just the realization that she died already, I mean, life expectancy isn't great in a world like this without modern medicine, so it's not surprising that someone could die 40 or 50 years old, but it still hurts to know that so many characters that we last left off with are now dead, and to then see how, for him, like, he's now to the point where he knows how to push them away when they get on his nerve by transforming into Tonari's form, but at the same time he's actually kind of excited to see them because it's like the one thing that keeps happening that he can always count on, sort of a thing. And to see him chubby at one point, like to see his chubby little cheeks just feasting on food, that was like a nice reliever, I have to say, because this episode played with my emotion, and that just immediately it let me laugh and just appreciate Fushi again without being just so guilt-driven. Like, To Your Eternity is a show that's best described as, why do we watch if only to suffer? And that's really what this show is, but it's such a good watch. It has such great characterization. The pain when it happens, it feels genuine. Like, you could have easily written this moment as saving Tonari. She got, sure, attacked, but she cut it. Maybe Fushi cuts her arm off. You know, there's a lot of ways you could write her surviving, even if it wasn't great. There's so many ways an author could have went about it. But by quickly reintroducing her and killing her off in this way, but then giving him a body that is immune to poison, something that she's been working her entire life, because that's how much Fushi meant to her, it's hard not to say that is a beautiful death that is completely different than all the deaths we've seen. We've seen deaths that unexpectedly happen, characters falling dead in their sleep, death from warrior blows, there's so many different ways characters die around Fushi, and it never feels like the author is trying to replicate the same death or the same type of emotional impact, but rather, when deaths happen, it feels believable for the world that they're in, whether a lack of modern healthcare, whether a lack of, safety from general people, let alone these knockers, and just the way Fushi adjusts his emotional connections to things, and how he's trying so hard, but nothing really connects the same way as those that have passed on already. It's heartbreakingly beautiful, and like at the very least, he's enjoying life more. He's connecting with people, even if it's just a random conversation. He's selling his swords to get new food, enjoying the feather beds, right? He is, at the very least, being something other than a hermit, but it still feels like he needs so much more and deserves so much more, and really, the only thing that could help him being an immortal, and probably the only immortal the show will ever have, is if he can deal with the knocker threat, and then at the very least, people can grow to an old age around him, so when they do eventually die, he's not just with them for a couple of years, he could be with them for 50 years potentially. And at the very least, that would be a way for him to be able to carry on, but it just feels like with the way the knockers are, he'll never get that hope, and it's tragic, but damn, honestly, this is one of the best To Your Eternity episodes. Even though it's been a hot minute since season 1, there's still key episodes I think about when thinking about the show, and I truly think this was the most emotional death for me and caught me off guard. But of course, I'll pass the torch over to everyone. What did you think of this episode? Did it hit you like it hit me? Like, even expecting her to eventually die, I think the way they directed it was completely a gut punch, but thoughts down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here. As I mentioned, you can support the Patreon if you want to see the full live reaction, or get a video shout out like Rajvir Malhans is also getting this week. So I appreciate the support, and catch you all next time. Take care, have a good one.